What's up? Do you feel like an imposter? Do you feel like you're just not good enough? Like you got to be in some place and you just don't belong there at all, and like everybody else around you is just better than you? Well, today in your luck, we're going to talk about how to handle imposter syndrome. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. I'm Danny, everybody. Randy, what's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
I feel like this is a stupid question, but have you ever felt like an imposter?
No, never. Totally confident all the
I'm
time.
always the best.
Yeah, I've been there a lot of times where I felt like I was gonna get found out. Like
Yeah.
I was the only person who knew that I wasn't good enough. And I still experience it even now because I like to try doing new stuff and it's scary because it's new and you
Yeah.
don't know and everybody else knows and you don't know. And it's like I'm gonna get found out for not knowing. Oh my gosh.
Well, and it's funny too because it's like also it's like I always find too, especially when you start something new and then like it's after you do it for just a little bit when you're starting to get good enough where you can do things so you can actually like start applying it. That's when you feel it too, because you also have a way better sense of what you don't know or like what, what's outside of your realm. And it's just, yeah, it's scary. But we also, I think we don't learn anything unless we take on these challenges too. So it's a
Mhm.
difficult thing that I think we all struggle with. But everybody's in luck because today we have a few tips for how to handle imposter syndrome, which I think is a very common thing. I'm gonna go first. My first one is remember, everybody feels like an imposter. I think literally at some point and probably like that week, everyone's like an imposter in some part of their life. I mean, it's a super common feeling. Like they've done studies on this where like literally everyone feels it's like they don't belong. Whether it's like you're talking about a class where like you don't feel like you're getting the information fast enough, work where you take on a new project and you feel like you're the one that doesn't know anything, that's struggling. Like everybody feels this way. And a lot of times it has to do with new circumstances, new environments. It has to do with just like not knowing really where you rank and stuff. But like, it is what it is. And like we all feel this way. So keeping that in mind, you're not alone is important, I think. Because usually when we feel it, we feel like nobody else knows. Nobody else feels this way. They're all confident. I'm the only one that feels like, an idiot that doesn't belong here.
Yeah, it's a great mind shift because it's I think a lot of us think that we're so messed up and everybody else has it all
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
but really, and especially with imposter syndrome, if you can just look at it and see that everyone's an imposter and just contemplate it. At this moment,
Yeah.
everyone's feeling like an imposter somewhere. And it's just like, okay, fine, this is my area. Cool.
Yeah. That's a good way to look at it
Mhm.
too, right? And not in this area and others. And like, because it's sad too. That feeling of being an imposter can derail people totally. And it's a shame because, there was no reason for that, but they let it get to them. They don't break free.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there many times. It's not fun.
No, it's not.
It's not fun at all. So I can definitely relate.
Yeah.
So my first one for how to handle imposter syndrome is I found that in my life this generally happens when you're kind of new at something. You're looking
Mhm.
around and everybody's been working there forever. They're all really good at this. They all know, you know, and it's because you're new. So when you're new, there's a very steep learning curve. Always is. So if you're comparing yourself to people who have been there for a year or a decade or many decades, it's just not fair. But instead, compare yourself to how you were yesterday or last week, like short term, and just look at the things that you've learned, the obstacles you've overcome, how you've developed in just this short period of time, and start recognizing how quickly you're adapting and how much better you're getting.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I'll always remember my advisor in undergrad because he had to have been like, I don't know. He seemed older, but he probably wasn't. But he had to have been like in his 50s or 60s at least. You know how when you're everybody seems older. But
He
but no, I
was
just remember.
probably like 30.
Yeah,
He
right.
must have
30,
been like 80. I don't know.
100. Yeah. No, but I remember saying because I remember sitting, I was working on my thesis and I was like, how come it's so easy for you? And he started laughing. He's like, I've been doing this as like professionally for like however many decades. He's like, that I have on you, that I've been reading these things. He's like, of course it's easier for me. He's like, that's ridiculous. Like to even assume that it wouldn't be is just idiotic, or to assume that you should be there. So, I mean, it was a great realization that, like, it's okay that I didn't know everything. I wasn't expected to know everything. Nobody would be in my situation. And keeping that in mind is like super helpful too, that you're new. You're new in this area and like you will get there, but you can't have it right now. It's not going to be the case. sometimes that's why we have mentors. That's why you reach out to other people with questions. That's why you do these things because it's a way for you to learn and also reach out to people that have been there for a long time. And just, it's easier. Yeah, good one.
Mhm.
Um, my second one is focus on what you can do, not your limitations. And I think this is actually really important because like we all can, even when you're new, you're going to be have certain skills in certain areas. You got there for a reason wherever you are, you're whether it's a new school or whether it's a job or whatever it is, like you have something that you brought to the table. So focus on what you're actually good at and recognize, what your limitations are so you can build on that, but don't let that derail you. Because we all have limitations. And I think that's where like when we really focus on imposter syndrome, we just highlight our limitations, but we forget about what we're actually capable of.
Hmm. Yeah, like this is really interesting for me and you because we've just kind of transitioned into the tech field. And
Yeah.
so like we have this skill set that's like super high in demand, soft skills, being able
Yeah.
to communicate with people, which apparently is just this like mythical beast in technology that nobody can do. But it's something where you need to consider what you're actually good
Yeah.
at, what you bring to the table. Because yeah, granted, our tech skills aren't as developed as some people who've been doing it forever. But guess what? We can talk with people.
Yeah. And it brings a lot to the table though, because if you can't, it adds a lot to it. And it means you can also figure out what people actually need and stuff. It makes it a lot easier. Yeah. It is
Hmm.
funny though. Everybody says the same thing, dude. I know. I've literally talked
Yeah.
to people on the phone on interviews and they're like, wow, you're really good talking to people. I'm like, oh my God, who are you talking to?
I know, right? Crazy. So the next one for how to handle imposter syndrome is, you need to consider that every person, especially all those people that you idolize, at first they struggled. They were
Yeah.
not born with the gifts that you see them with. And it's so hard because that's when they became famous when they had those gifts. But there was a time before they had them where they had to develop them. And generally, there was probably a long period where they struggled to develop those gifts, but that happens behind the scenes. And then they're an overnight success, and everybody's like, "Oh, they're born with that." If
Yeah.
I could never do that because I wasn't born that way. And it's like, come
Yeah.
on.
Just takes time, right? It's funny. I remember never when I first started teaching too. Like it took me forever to put together like lesson plans and do all because it was hard. And then like the stress of going in and like standing in front of people and like whatever. But like, and I looked at other faculty there for a long time. I was like, man, I'll never get to that point. I think everybody experiences that work, right? But then, after doing it for a couple of years, like just got easier and easier because you get better at it. You know what you just know how to do things. You know the routine, the format, and most everything has that. So once you figure it out, you're good. It just takes time to get there. Yeah, a good one. My last one for how to handle imposter syndrome is imagine where it'll be in 1, 5, or 10 years. Because this is, I think, it's most often, when we're new at something that we feel this way, or when it's a new place or new experience. So imagine after you've done it for that long, like you're going to be good at it. It's going to be easy. I mean, most people, like you look at like a workplace is a great example. People have been there for 10, 15 years. It seems easy because they've been doing the same thing for 10 or 15 years. They know exactly how to do it. They probably already have stuff written up or whatever that they just copy and, it's super simple because most problems are the same. You just revisit them always. And so once you've been doing it for a long time, you know how things work. You knock it out. It's easy. So just imagine yourself in that place and you'll see you'll get there.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great one. Imagining your future self. And then my last one is a saying that I heard a while back. That's anything worth being good at is worth being bad at until you can get there. And
Yeah.
and it just helps remind me, like when I get stuck in those situations where I'm like, I'm freaking terrible at this, but I'm like, but I want to do this. So I'm just going to be terrible at this for as long as it takes to get good at
Yeah.
it. And eventually, if you stick with it long enough, you're going to get good at it.
Yeah, it's funny, right? Like, you never fail until you stop trying. That's when you really fail. But you're gonna fail a lot and you're gonna make a lot of mistakes. But like it is so true. Like if you just stick with it, you'll be fine. And it's so hard. If you really want it though, you will stick with it. I mean, that's the truth. Like I find myself doing that all the time too. I'm like, oh my God, I'll never figure this out. It's too impossible. Then, I want it, so I gotta keep doing it. And I will get better and I'll figure it out. And then you remember those problems, like especially too, I think the problems are the ones that you remember how to do and solve most. It sticks with you. Once you figure it out, it's like you have that knowledge forever. It makes it easier. Yeah. So there you have it. Hopefully that helps. If you feel like an imposter, don't worry. Hopefully this helps you handle imposter syndrome. This is the Existential Stoic podcast. We'll check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Like, share, subscribe. It helps us out a lot. If you could leave a review, that would be great, especially on Apple Podcasts. They're the big one. We'll be back later with another episode, though. Until then, later.
Later, Danny.